So my grandpa died because of cancer on New Year's 2021. And it was shock because he didn't feel sick before and doctors found out he had last stage. And there's no way to help him. Only he can live a little bit longer, but he would suffer a lot and at the end he died 1 month after diagnosing cancer. We spent 1 week at grandma's house because she's lonely now and we wanted to be her support, and day after my grandpa died, my dad was sleeping on the couch and he woke up because someone was walking next to him. And he thought that it's my grandpa. But he turned the lights on and there was literally no one. And he heard loud footsteps coming to the kitchen at 3 a.m. My grandpa was always up at hours like this and ate food late at night. He told us in the morning what happened, and same night I had a dream with my grandpa where he came home from the forest and we all were in shock because we thought he's dead. And he looked younger in my dream. And my aunt had a dream with him too, where he looked younger too, and she woke up from the dream at 3:40 a.m. Coincidence? Same night, my dad heard footsteps at 3 a.m. My aunt had a dream at 3 a.m. and I had the same dream, but I don't know the time. This isn't everything why I believe he's still here. This happened after like 4 or 5 days after he died. Only me, dad and aunt had experience with him, and no family member saw him in dream or something before. My mum was sleeping with my younger brother in the room where there's a PC, and my grandpa very often used the PC late at night. My mum woke up exactly at 3:15 a.m. because something woke her up and told her in head to look at PC, and boom, exactly when she looked at the PC, it turned on. She called me and grandma to come and see what happened, and we had feeling like someone is there, but for me it was creepy because it was 3 a.m. And then we started to pray and mom told me to turn off PC because she wanted to sleep then. I turned it off and after a few seconds it literally turned on again in front of me. Also after this, PC turned on second time. My grandpa didn't have a classic keyboard, but it had red lights. And all of a sudden they started flickering and this was crazy too. After that, my other family members started to have signs from him too. For example, his smell, etc. Also, last thing to say, my grandma was alone after we left, and she was very sad and thinking about grandpa, and then her glass cracked for no reason. My room at the time was decently big. I'd say about 14 by 10 feet across. Now I was going to bed and I dropped some stuff from a snack run in a plastic bag against one side of my room opposite of my bed. And I was sleepy, so I decided to go to bed. One important thing to note is I only had one previous paranormal thing happen in the house, and it was almost 7 years prior to this. And it was voices from the main floor, which I heard from the basement. Back to what happened. So I'm passing out, and about what feels like 2 or 3 hours after falling asleep, I didn't check the clock, I hear that plastic bag moving. I thought maybe one of my family members was getting into my snacks, so I was about to roll over and scold them. Right before I do, I hear the most blood-curdling growl in my ear, like a cross between a bear and a big dog, and I was close enough I could feel the humidity of its breath. Nobody in my family could make a sound like that, nor would anyone do that to one another. Anyways, I'm on my side still paralysed, but the weirdest part right after I hear the growl, the bag continues moving as though somebody is rifling through it. This continues for probably 10 minutes or so, it felt like hours, till I pass out again. Honestly, I was so tired from a long day, I crashed hard. I worked construction back then. The following morning, I woke up to not only see the bag moved about 4 or 5 feet, but its contents moved around in the bag. I've got a very good memory, especially when it comes to judging environments, etc. Needless to say, I just about jumped out of my skin. 10 years later, I still remember what it sounded like. The fear of being so powerless, so resigned to fate. Guess I'll die, comes to mind. Now since that happened, I feel like my body sleeps with one eye open. This kind of feeling of fear was not something I've ever felt before since then. It does help that I'm a bigger dude, 6'1", about 190 pounds back then. But to feel so overpowered really cuts at the core of your being. Now, this was the only encounter that truly scared me. I was doing laundry and the light flicked off. I looked over and see a hand and at the top of what I thought was my dad's head. Our family dynamic is a little roughhousing with the parents when I was growing up. So I was running over to pester my dad. Well, to my shock, nobody was there. I searched that basement low and high. Nobody but me. I bolted upstairs after and I got my dad. We cleared the basement a second time. This time I was armed with a knife. Like that would do anything. Nothing. Again. Laundry again, but this time I had my laundry next to the switch and I was putting hangers on them, folding, etc. Suddenly, I feel a breathy whisper in my right ear. I flip around and there's an older gentleman with a striped red and white shirt, horizontally striped, with jeans about 4 feet away from me. I glanced at him long enough to know it wasn't somebody I knew, and booked it. Thinking back on it, he looked so neutral, almost confused. Anyways, got my dad again, and we did a full clear again. Nothing again. It's also important to point out there is no way to get in or out of the basement without the whole house knowing, as the stairs are super loud and the basement windows all have bars which are all locked. Also, there's no way he would have been able to get behind me, as I was just working there. Also, the space between me and the entrance would have led him to bumping into me, as it's only about half a foot due to laundry baskets and clothing piled there. I have a fair amount of encounters, but these are some ones I remember well. It was a December night, very windy night. A lot of dust was in the air. My brother and I were going to eat at the restaurant, which is far away from my home, around 30 minutes away. We don't eat outside, but for that day it was special, because we dropped corns out of fields at that day, and we were tired, so we decided to let's go and eat outside. The place I live in is really lonely and spooky at night, because fields and fields everywhere, and the woods, though we've been living there for years, but nothing really scary about it. Anyway, we reached the restaurant and we had a really nice dinner. Strangely, there were no customers except us. I don't know, but the lady from the corridor was staring at us for some reason. Though we talked and enjoyed ourselves, we finished our dinner. After finishing our dinner, my brother asked who will drive the way back home. I definitely didn't want to drive because I felt exhausted and sleepy, and he was feeling the same. And we fought for it, but I couldn't win, so I decided to drive. I was driving us home, and about 10 minutes of our way yet to be, and my brother who was sitting behind me screamed my name in a demonic voice, and I pulled my brakes and freaked out. I got off the bike and was about to punch my knuckles on his neck, but he pointed his hand in the woods and said, "Look." And I looked in the woods, and I saw 2 bright eyes. I was scared, but my brother seemed okay. He wasn't even scared seeing that on this empty dark road going from the woods. So I turned my flashlight on and beamed it in the woods, and I saw a small lamb-like size of a bag. And my brother just started walking towards it without saying anything, and he grabbed the lamb and asked me, "I want pet." At this night I was super worried and was in a hurry, so I let him. I can clearly see my brother's obsession over that lamb. I started my motorcycle again and started to drive home, and I had a really bad feeling about this rabbit. After a few minutes, I sensed that we were slowly getting surrounded by clouds because I couldn't see. And I saw my brother whispering something to that lamb. After a while, I started feeling something odd, like something wasn't right. I felt something heavy, and I saw my motorcycle speeding down strangely. I saw brakes aren't pressed though. When I turned back on my right side, I saw lamb with 5 feet long legs laying on right of my side. I never seen anything like that. I never seen 5 feet of lamb's leg. I doubted that, and I rechecked, but this time I turned back with left side. I again saw large, scary 5 feet long legs. I could see symbols on its head. I really got scared. My body went cold. I couldn't drive, because it was something odd I've never seen in my life. I told my brother, who was sitting back on the motorcycle, I told him to throw it away because at this point, my bike was really slow. Because I didn't know if that thing was gaining its size unnaturally. He didn't want to let it go. I was scared. I screamed, "Throw it away!" And he heard that I knew he was possessed at some point and he threw it. And I felt my bike like a cloud. I could speed up. And I turned around and saw a goat-faced demon who was about to fly. I didn't turn back after that. I accelerated my bike like Godspeed, and I know my brother just witnessed something of natural itself. He couldn't speak properly for 3 days. I drove us home, I locked everything, and we together were super terrified by the event. We didn't sleep. We hugged each other all night. Later that night, and saw 2 very bright white coloured eyes peeking through our window. I don't believe in God, but that night I was begging all gods to come and protect us from that thing. The next morning, we met a few people who were locals and bandits and talked about that event, and they told us that we were really lucky that he didn't choose us. The place where we found that lamb was materialised with witchcraft, lockets, and the size of human voodoos. Not sure if this is true or hoax, but we were baptised by locals and trying to forget the event we've just been through. I've lived in this house since I was 8. I'm 19 now, and I always knew there was something off about this place. From the cold spots randomly appearing in my upstairs, to the slightest movement of anything hanging around my house. I always figured there was a ghost here. I eventually started calling this ghost Patrick, a namesake given after a dickhead I knew in my high school, mainly given since he was being quite a dick to us in the house. He didn't like that much, restoring to such measures as fucking with the lights on random occasions, to even going so far as to push in my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I still have an indent from where he pushed my ribs in very badly one time. Eventually, I'd had enough of his torture, resorting to using a typical ghost app, I know, how original, to try to ask him a few questions. Firstly, I asked his name, to which he replied with Charles. I addressed by the name he'd given, feeling a tinge of cold running behind my neck. After asking a few more questions, is there anyone else here? No. Where did you come from? King Mass, London. How did you die? He didn't answer that one, etc. I eventually went to turn in for the night. I jokingly said good night to Charles, to which the app said bye back. I had a few nightmares that night, so I kept waking up and going back to sleep constantly. It was annoying, and upon the 5th try, I had my hands sticking out in such a way that the palm was sticking up toward the ceiling. An intense cold rushed over it. My fingers suddenly curled together as if someone were holding it. And that's when I realised as I was drifting off that Charles was holding my hand. Probably seeing how I was having such a shit time sleeping in an attempt to hold me. And you know what? It actually did help. I went back to sleep without any problems after that. Waking up the next morning only to find that he must have left at some point since there no longer was a cold. There wasn't anything on a Charles from London that used to live in this house as far as I could research. I don't know if that's truly his real name. But for whatever reason, ever since I started calling him that, he's left me in the house alone, only appearing when I call for him. I was about 8 when this happened. Me and my parents were living in a nice 2-bedroom house with a full furnished basement. My dad would be down there often, which is why one day I went down there. One of the lights was on, so I could see half of the basement. But my dad wasn't there. But there was another man though. I remember him clearly. Balding, round glasses, soft face. I'd never seen him before, but I was afraid of him. He didn't speak at all. He just stood in front of me, looking at me. It was a weird feeling, but I made my way back up to the stairs and didn't tell anyone for a few years. I told my grandmother for the first time, explained the man and how he was just standing there. She was more surprised than I thought she would be, considering that I assumed it was just my imagination. She asked me to describe him, and she was even more surprised when I did, but not entirely scared. She told me that I described my uncle perfectly, a man who I had never seen a picture of before. He was my grandfather's brother, making him technically my granduncle, who died when my dad was around 13, meaning that I had never had the chance to meet him since I was over 10 years yet to come. My grandmother thinks that my uncle just wanted to meet me since he never got a chance to while he was still alive. Another thing I remember is my dad always talking to himself while he was in the basement, a habit he still has and that I picked up on heavily. I wonder if my dad ever saw or spoke to his uncle down there while we still lived in that house. This was my only encounter with my uncle or a ghost in general. My family believes in the paranormal. Growing up, they would tell me stories about past experiences in the family. There were stories that ranged from a ghost in the garage of my aunt to the more spectacular stories, such as about a painting that my grandmother had bought on a market that was supposedly haunted and would eventually take the life of one of the 11 grandchildren. All are great stories, worthy of their own post, but I always took their stories with a grain of salt. I was always very interested to hear them, but I never truly believed them completely. That would change. My grandmother lived in a grand old farmhouse from the late 18th century, with a big and beautiful garden. My mother grew up in that house and would tell me that she believes the house to be haunted. My grandmother, mother, and aunts have all seen a woman in white at some point during their lives there. When we stayed over as a kid, we never wanted to walk through the house alone, especially at night when we had to go to bed. You would always have the feeling of being watched when roaming the halls. Luckily, nothing more than that ever happened, and growing up, I just chalked it up to me being just a kid. 4 years ago, my grandmother's health started rapidly declining. Instead of bringing her to a nursing home, we decided to take her into our house. She still lives with us to this day. Her mental health started getting worse after living with us for a year. Because of this, we decided it was time to sell her house that had remained untouched. We put the house on the market, and after a year, we had found a buyer. Before the sale, we went to the house a couple of times with the family to do some maintenance, but nothing out of the ordinary happened during any of these events. Then came moving day. We had a small trailer and were going back and forth between houses, moving all of the furniture out. By the end of the day, only me and my stepdad were still moving. There was only one more piece of furniture to move, a big closet from the bedroom that we had just disassembled. Unfortunately, the trailer was already completely filled and we would need to come back to pick up the closet. We placed the closet in the entrance hall and drove off to unload the trailer. We came back to the house about 30 minutes later. When we opened the door, we saw that a plate from between the wooden beams in the ceiling, above where we placed the closet, had fallen to the floor. I thought it was weird, but I didn't really think about it and went to start moving the closet to the trailer. When we got to the closet, we both see a necklace of a cross laying on top of it. That necklace definitely was not there before we left. The closet was completely disassembled and carried sideways down the stairs. If it was there before, it would have already fallen off. It either was on top of the ceiling plate that fell and landed perfectly on the closet, or it was placed there. In hindsight, this isn't a smart move, but we took the necklace home to show it to my mother and asked my grandmother if she had seen the necklace before. We got home and instantly I told Mom about what had just happened and showed her the necklace. We had a Dora the Explorer doll on our desk in the kitchen for my sister's children, and I kid you not, when I showed my mother the necklace, the doll of the opposite side of the room started speaking her voice lines. Weird, but okay, coincidence I guess. We asked my grandmother if she had seen him before, but she hadn't. A few days passed and I was going to be home alone for a week. Nothing had happened since, so I was already starting to forget about the necklace. Everything was fine for the first few days. On the third day, I decided I was going to take advantage of being home alone for a week. I put on a movie, rolled up a joint and lit it inside my room. The moment that I exhale the first puff of smoke, I hear the loudest bang that I've ever heard knock on my door. I immediately freeze up in terror, knowing that I'm home alone and that we have kept the creepy necklace that we found at my grandmother's house. Time goes by, About 30 minutes, I start to relax again. But I haven't yet tried to smoke again. Continued watching the movie when a scene made me laugh a little. The second I made a sound, another loud bang knocked on my door. It sounded like someone punched the door with all of his power. I froze up again. After about a minute, I mustered up the courage and decided to see what could have caused it. I opened the door but saw nothing, inspected the door but couldn't find anything. For the rest of the week, I felt watched when I walk inside the hall. I could feel where it was watching me from, but I never actually saw something. When my mother got me home, I told her everything and demanded that the cross would be thrown away. I tried to show her how loud the bang on the door is by punching it with full force, but shockingly, I never managed to get a bang as loud as the ones I heard that day, even though I'm a pretty strong guy. She agreed to throw away the cross, and she got rid of it. I believe that the ghost from my grandmother's house was attached to that cross, and that it had followed us when we took the necklace home. Ever since then, I became a complete believer that there is something more to life than what we can see. If there's one thing you can learn from the story, don't take the creepy necklace home. I'm what I consider a very regular man in my early 30s. I have a stable job, I'm in a solid and happy relationship, I enjoy travelling and eating out, gaming, hiking, and culture. But my entire life, I've experienced something which I have called life bleeding. I've really struggled to find anything similar online, so I decided to put the sensation out into the open world to see if anyone else has experienced something similar. It's a very broad yet subtle sense of memory and emotion, so apologies in advance if there's not much to go off. Every now and then, it could be minutes apart, weeks, months, or maybe even years, I get this sensation out of nowhere that I'm living another life. This life could be happening parallel to mine or in the past, but I've never had the sensation of anything happening in the future. It's also never the same life I'm feeling when it happens. The feeling itself is super hazy. I'm fully aware and in control of everything I'm doing in the present as myself. But my mind and memories for a brief moment open up. The most similar sensation I can describe it to is déjà vu. But it's just I'm experiencing something from a different place, perspective, and from a different being. That's neither happening now or has happened. The events themselves are mostly mundane. It could be someone driving somewhere, eating a meal, or having a conversation. But I have had occasions where I've experienced traumas, such as bereavements or physical harm. I want to clarify that this isn't just me thinking and imagining these things, at least I don't feel I am. It always feels so distant in my mind, and it's a struggle to bring it into closer view. It's just something I've had with me for as long as I can remember, where for a second or two, my life is bleeding into someone else's and vice versa. Back in 2013-14, I lived in a house with 3 other roommates. In this house I can recount dozens of seemingly paranormal experiences, ranging from scary to odd, to almost normal. But this one really stands out to me the most, because I've never been able to figure it out. One night, I was in bed with my boyfriend in my room. We went to sleep early-ish because we both had work in the morning. We were both asleep, but suddenly, not sure of the time, my boyfriend woke up gasping and freaked out. He's almost yelling, "There was a face right there! A face! It was getting in my face!" I'd never seen him so terrified. He was always such a relaxed guy. He was sitting up in bed, sweating and breathing hard. I figured he just experienced sleep paralysis. It would have been his first. I tried to calm him down and he eventually went back to sleep. I rolled over in bed and was trying to get back to sleep, but I'm the type of person who can't just go back to sleep after waking up. As I'm laying there, I start hearing tapping in threes around the room. The first 2 times, I thought that the tapping was just the house settling, but the tapping in threes would change locations and pitch every time. It would be above the bed on the ceiling and go tap tap tap. Then it would be next to my head on the wall. Bed was next to the wall. Tap tap tap. Then it would be by the door. Tap tap tap. Then on the other wall. Tap tap tap. Then on the floor. Tap tap tap. This went on for a while, but I'm not sure how long. It felt like hours to me. I was honestly so scared that I didn't open my eyes or even move. I just stayed frozen under my blanket. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I asked my boyfriend if he remembered the nightmare, and he said yes. I don't remember if I asked him about the tapping. The first thing I tried to explain it with was some sort of pest, like a rat or bug. But I don't understand how it could travel so fast, or make such strong taps. And we never had any pests in the house, to my knowledge. My grandparents have always acknowledged that their house was haunted, and I've had several experiences there, and so has everyone who spends enough time at their house. So it's definitely not a secret. Though it's known that both my great-grandparents hang around, my great-grandfather actually passed in the house, and the previous owner of the land is supposed to be hanging around too. More on that some other time. But when I was still a kid, 14 years old, my brother and I had a shared experience in our grandma's art room that also served as our bedroom when we would spend summers with them. My brother, 12 at the time, and I were wrestling around on the bottom bunk of our metal bunk beds when we heard my grandma come down the hall and open the door next to ours. It was the back kitchen/living room. It was a duplex, but they added a door to connect the two houses once my uncle was injured and they needed access to both parts of the house. Where they kept my other uncle's dog because he had fleas. Sad, I know. But they would go to the back to let him outside. We heard her and George, the dog, walk down the hall, and the door of my uncle's room opened and closed. To get to the hallway, he had to go through the front kitchen and my uncle's room to get to the back hallway. My brother and I thought nothing of it because it was normal for us to hear the back and forth foot traffic in the hall, either to the bathroom, the closets, or the back kitchen/living room. But not long after my grandma and George had left, probably 5 minutes or a little more, we weren't really paying attention because we were too busy goofing off. We heard a knock on the bedroom door. We stopped playing and looked at each other for a minute because we hadn't heard my grandma and George come back, and it was too soon for her to be letting them inside again. We said come in and heard the sound of the baby gate scraping. My grandparents put the baby gate up so my grandma could leave the door to her art room open without the animals getting in, mainly the fat cats that were allowed to go anywhere but the art room. And we both saw the doorknob turn. It was one of those bar ones, I really don't know what they're called or how else to describe it. And the door swung open, but no one was there. We both panicked and ran down the hallway because there was no way anyone could open the door and just disappear before the door swung open. The hall was just too long, and we would have heard the footsteps on the old, echoey hall floor. We found my grandma in the front living room playing games on her Kindle, like she loves to do. And even though we already knew it couldn't have been her or my granddad, who was asleep in their bedroom connected to the front living room, since they took shifts such for my uncle who's handicapped, and my granddad was always on the night shift before we passed 2 years ago. We asked her if she had tried to play a prank on us and that it wasn't funny. She asked us what we were talking about, and we told her that I've already written above. Without skipping a beat, she told us we shouldn't be scared because it was just our great-grandma, Marion, my granddad's late mother, and that she was just saying hi and checking up on us, and that she does the same for my grandparents by turning the TVs on and off randomly, and would do so persistently until whoever was experiencing it said hi, and told her everything was alright, before letting them go back to whatever they were doing, usually sleeping. But needless to say, it still freaked my brother and I out pretty badly, and we decided to stay up front with Grandma for the rest of the day, and for a week or so after that, we refused to go to bed by ourselves, and would wait until the other sibling was ready for bed before going back to the room to sleep. Looking back, none of the experiences anyone has had in the house has been scary, so it feels foolish to have let the experience scare us so badly, but we were still just kids. And the idea of our great-grandma coming to check on us, especially without us being able to see her, scared the living hell out of us. Earlier this month, I returned home after dropping my sons off at school. Except for our 2 cats, I was home alone. I was washing dishes in the kitchen while the cats scuttled to and fro in the living room playfully. After a moment, I realised it was curiously quiet. A strange sort of quiet, and I turned away from the kitchen and went in search for the cats. I couldn't find them. I called them and walked around the house. I went through the study towards their favourite window in the front hallway, but they weren't on the windowsill. I turned to go back into the study to see if they were in one of the shelves on the credenza and stopped short. There, in the centre of the doorway between the study and front hall, was an old, thick, heavy encyclopedia-type dictionary, L through Z. I stared at it. It hadn't been there just moments before. I would have seen and/or kicked it as I stepped through from the study into the front hall. I left it alone for the moment, stepping over it and back through the study into the living room. From here, I could now see one of the cat's tails under the sofa. This was very strange. They haven't gone under the sofa since they were small kittens. They had to struggle to get under there. I tried coaxing them out, but they wouldn't budge. I left them alone and went back to the dictionary on the floor. It hadn't been there when I stepped through the first time and, in fact, hadn't been there when I tidied up that morning before I started on the dishes. I picked it up and around the corner to the shelf in the front hallway where it belonged. The book is positively archaic, and we have it because it was gifted to us more than 24 years ago by my parents, along with an entire set of encyclopedias. For their then future grandchildren. We lugged them around with us each time we moved. As I was mulling over how it came to be there, I heard my phone ring. It was my sister, calling to tell me our cousin had a stroke and passed away. My mother was an actress for decades. From a very young age, I had been in and out of many theatres. I was in on all of the superstitions and behind-the-scenes stories that honestly were frightening, but I couldn't help but listen to what the cast and crew had to say. Theatre people have a way with telling stories. Of course, I had some experiences of my own. Cold spots, the feeling of being watched, and disembodied footsteps or voices. But I had just chalked it up to being a kid with an overactive imagination. Knowing what I know now, I wonder if it was more than just that, my imagination. Anyway, following the footsteps of my mom, I began my own artistic ventures at the age of 7. I'm in high school now and have been acting for a decade as of this year. Throughout my career, I've been in hundreds of productions and in and out of countless venues. I'm not giving you this information to brag, so I'm very sorry if it comes off that way. I just wanted to give you an idea of how this particular theatre stands out among the others. This particular instance, I was in rehearsals for a school production of an off-campus venue. I don't want to give out the exact name to protect the company and cast, but I can give you the building's nickname, the Wendy. I know it's not an exactly striking or chilling name, but it does personify the building in a way other theatres around town aren't. It's made a name for itself. One of the reasons why can be attributed to the fact that many in my city, particularly among theatre folk, consider the building to be alive in a way. Although the entities that haunt it are very, very much dead. As I grew older, my interest in the paranormal grew, and it's been a fun thing to learn about. Growing up around these stories and places definitely had made me more and more curious. On this particular day of rehearsals, me and a couple of friends decided to ask our director if anything strange had happened recently. It was January, the start of a new year. This was just before our lunch break, and we had finished up all of our work for the morning. Our director sighed and said we would think he was making something up, or straight up just going crazy, but we insisted we would believe him. He told us that his experience took place that December, locking up the theatre after the closing of the Christmas show that year. The only 2 people left in the theatre were himself and another person from the cast. Only 2 people, or so he may have thought. As he was walking out of the green room, which is a room where actors wait to go on stage, do quick changes, etc., he heard an ear-splitting cackle that sounded like a classic stereotypical witch. It was crystal clear, and sounded like it came from someone standing directly behind him. He whirled around to find no one. He went in search of the other cast member who was in the office down the hall from the green room. He asked what was so funny to make him laugh like that. The cast member looked confused and had explained he hadn't laughed. No one else was in the theatre and he didn't hear anything anyway. It's been quiet since. After our director had told us the story, he excused himself to go out to lunch, instructing the cast not to leave a mess in the lobby and not to go into the theatre without an adult. Obviously, my friends and I decided to go in. After we made sure he was gone, we snuck up the stairs. The doors were unlocked, as we expected them to be, and we stepped inside. Since the theatre wasn't in use, all of the lights were off, except the ghost light in the middle of the stage. If you don't know what a ghost night is, Google it to find out more. The history behind them is honestly pretty cool. It was incredible. The theatre holds up to 1,000 people. The tiny light wasn't big enough to brighten the entirety of the auditorium, instead casting strange shadows across the audience. The three of us stuck side by side, too scared to walk down the steps towards the stage. As the door shut behind us, it became even darker. We looked around for a little bit from our porch on the steps, and eventually started debating whether or not to go into the green room. We talked about our director's story for not even 5 minutes, when there was a weird lull in the conversation. The air got tense and heavy. Each of us just stared at each other. The hair on my neck stood up. Then, from the green room, across the stage and the rows and rows of seats, we heard it. A loud, bone-chilling cackle. I can't even describe the feeling I had after hearing that absolutely horrid laugh. It was evil, high-pitched like a woman's laugh, and truly terrifying. After it had registered that what we all had heard, we stood there in fear, eyes wide, before I broke the silence. "Did you hear that?" My friend replied, "You mean the fucking cackle?" So we all heard it? Once it was confirmed we all had experienced the same thing, that we weren't individually going insane, we bolted out of the theatre. The realization that whatever it was had been listening, waiting for the perfect moment to taunt us, still haunts me to this day. And it's been quiet since. Okay, so it started about 2 years ago. Fairly short story. I love a bubble bath, my way of relaxing. It has always felt safe and comforting. One night, I was soaking in the bath, nodding off a bit, enjoying the silence. Then all of a sudden, I had the strongest feeling. When I say feeling, it was like a vision, a flash. That a woman was going to rush into the bathroom and hold me under the water. I can still see her when I think about it. Young blue eyes, pale dark hair. I had a vision of her kneeling next to the bath, holding me under. The feeling was so strong, and I felt so scared that I got straight out of the bath. After that, I felt a bit uneasy in the bathroom, like she was watching me. I just tried to put it in the back of my mind, tried to convince myself it was a silly thought. Nothing else happened for a few weeks, and I was starting to feel comfortable again. Until one night, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom, getting ready for bed. There's a huge mirror on the side of my bathroom wall. I glanced in the mirror and I saw her. She had her arms outstretched towards me, like lunging towards me. I could feel a breeze, like the vision was only there for a few seconds, like a flash. I was scared and it stayed with me. That was the second time I'd seen her, and she didn't feel friendly. I did what a lot of people do. I spoke to her. I told her firmly that she had no permission to be in this house or to harm me or anyone in it. I repeated this message around the house whenever I felt uneasy and was alone. My partner would think I was crazy. I haven't seen or felt her since. I still feel uneasy in the bathroom. The most recent scary experience was only last year, late last year. I was in bed, asleep. I remember I was having a nice dream. Can't remember what it was. Probably about Johnny Depp. And I remember I woke up with a start. You know, like when you have that feeling of falling? When I opened my eyes, I saw a man coming towards me. He looked so angry. Again, it only lasted a few seconds. I remember feeling like I needed to protect myself. He was tall, had a dad bod, brown hair, brown eyes, and a pink polo shirt on. I remember closing my eyes, and when I opened them again, he was gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. After that happened, I spoke aloud that no one, good or negative, was allowed in the bedroom, and I still visualized a barrier across the door, stopping anything from getting in. I also now have a selenite in the room. Nothing has happened in that room since. On a side note, I do have a dog that sleeps in the same room as me, and it didn't react. That makes me feel that it could have just been a bit of a dream, you know? Like a dream imprint. It felt very real to me and still does when I think back. Make of these stories what you will. I don't normally have things like this happen, and I feel I have a very good grip on my emotions. When I am freaked out because of a film or when it's in real danger, I can understand which emotion is real and which is my mind playing with me. As I mentioned previously, I usually get feelings, smells, and hear voices. The stories I've told here are the only times I've seen something. That's 3 times in just over 30 years. I've always had strange experiences my whole life. I used to think most houses were haunted, but the older I'm becoming, the more I think it's me. I often hear whispers directly in my ear, smell odd things that are unexplained, like perfume, tobacco, herbs, and get the sense of someone watching me, see things in mirrors. From ex-boyfriends' houses, friends' houses, the many houses I've moved to, there always seems to be some sort of activity or strange feeling. I've had too many to mention, but I will mention one that stuck with me. It was about 5 years ago. I was renting a house. It was a very comfortable house, and there wasn't much activity. It was in a mining village. I got a strange feeling in the back bedroom, but it didn't stop me going in there. Just a bit uneasy. Anyway, one night I woke up in the middle of the night to go on the loo. I was half asleep and nothing seemed unusual. After I was done, I came out of the bathroom. The bathroom was directly opposite the front room, so you can see right in it. I looked into the front room and saw a man standing there. He didn't look completely solid. I could see through him. I could see the TV behind him. He was short, looked like an adult. I can't remember his clothes, but I can remember his face, and he was wearing a flat cap. He had a broad smile and kind eyes. Not that I could see the eyes as normal eyes. There were no pupils or colour. He was all grey. But it was night, and there were no lights. He was looking at me. I couldn't believe what I was looking at and really wanted to make sure it wasn't my eyes playing tricks on me. I stood there for a good solid 5 minutes just staring. I didn't feel scared, just curious. He moved and started looking at the TV. It felt like he was curious about it, like he had never seen one before. I'm 100% sure of what I saw. I spent the time making sure what I saw was correct. After about 5 minutes, I felt he was doing no harm and meant no harm, and I felt comfortable to go back to bed. I really didn't feel scared, but I have felt scared in other encounters. The scary ones happened more recently. So this happened about 5 years ago now. To this day, I cannot explain what happened to my quiet country neighbourhood, down a dead-end dirt road south of the Oregon border. The following events occurred over a few months, in summer and autumn. It started off with little things. The dogs randomly barked and howled, mine and the homes across the lane. We lived in a fairly rural community, so it was common for pesky animals such as coyotes, raccoons, foxes, or even larger predators to come close in search of livestock or barn cats to eat. So we figured it was just the security team doing their jobs. It wasn't until we realised it would start and stop at the exact same moment. Every dog, either inside or outside, spontaneously going nuts for several homes, that we started to raise questions. Another time was when I had come home from town with my mother. We were just unloading the weekly shopping when I needed to use the restroom. I excused myself and heard my mom leave, come back inside and unpack the last bag and put things away in the pantry. I finished my business, washed up, and heard the back sliding door open and shut. I figured that she was heading out to check on the horses. It wasn't until I left the washroom and went out onto the back deck that I realised something was wrong. My mother, the only other person living in the house, was all the way clear across the pasture adjacent to our neighbour. She would have had to actually grow wings and fly over that several acre distance in the 10 seconds it took me to head down the hall and out the back door. So who was messing around in the kitchen that whole time? It only got stranger from there. A mysterious shadow man kept appearing in people's homes. One time, it even got recorded on the neighbour girl's phone in the background of a video. It took a concerned family member who was watching to notice and ask, "Hey, why is there a man in B's bedroom?" He would also cross the road at night in front of our headlights. You could hear voices in the house and random knocking on my bedroom door, but nobody was there when I'd check. There was one time that my then boyfriend, now my husband, and I were watching a movie in the middle of the afternoon in the living room, and we heard my mom call my name from her room across the house. We paused, I got up, and nearly ran into her as she's leaving her room to come out. Asked me why I was calling her. Jay and I shared dumbfounded looks, and I said I was getting up to see her since she called me. She turned pale and said no, she hadn't. It all came to a head, though, when there was a knocking at the front door one afternoon. That same 3 knocks. It was so forceful that I heard it in my room, and when Mom heard it too, she yelled, "All right, I'm coming." I figured it was a neighbour coming to talk about a loose animal or something. But then it hit me. The dogs were totally silent. Nobody could ever come up to the front door, let alone pound on it, without our dogs barking. I'm halfway across the room when I come to this realisation, and a chill runs through me, hard. I rip open my door and dash to the front room, where my mom is standing facing an entirely empty front porch. With our wide open driveway, there was no way in hell some random kid could play a prank on us in the middle of nowhere without us seeing them running away or the dust trail from driving off. I took one look at my mom's confused and terrified face, and I whistled for our biggest dog to go with me outside to search for anything I could find. The rest stayed in the house with Mom. I never found anything, but there was a very heavy weight of being watched. After that, nothing else happened. No more noises, shadows, anything. Though every now and then, I still can't shake that there's something unfinished about it all. To this day, the sound of someone knocking on my door, as innocent as it is, gives me chills. So in November 2017, I was in the end stages of my pregnancy. Our apartment was heated by a gas fireplace, and stupidly, the carbon monoxide detector was in an adjacent room with the door closed. It wasn't until the door opened that we, husband and I, were aware that I was slowly being poisoned. I was sent to the hospital. While on oxygen, I went into labour and thus began a very horrible ordeal. I can elaborate if needed, but I'm skipping this. Anyways, 3 things happened. My daughter was born, something latched onto me while I was in ER for the poisoning, and my husband took a job out of state to support us while getting his career going, week 1 after leaving the hospital. The whole time I'm in the maternity wing, I'm having issues sleeping. Insomnia is common for me, so I didn't think of it too hard. However, every time I started to sleep, I would wake up from a panic attack. This went on for the week I was there and about a week after coming home. Eventually, I was able to start sleeping, but then things started to happen. I lived in the apartment for 3 years prior with no incidents, mind you, but onwards of week 2 from coming home, this happened. November 22nd, 2017. Whispering coming from the audio baby monitor. This is a common occurrence from this point forward. December 8th. First unusual cold spot found. Living room was always about 20 degrees warmer than the rest of the apartment. Heater. But suddenly, it was freezing in one spot of the room. Never cold there again. December 11th. The baby's mobile's battery drained rapidly. This also became common. First set of batteries lasted a month. All following batteries died within 72 hours. Was eventually moved to my mother's house, where the mobile operated as intended. January 3rd, 2018. Never felt comfortable being in the house. Felt cold no matter where I was. Started living in my mother's house to avoid being in my apartment. February 17th. Mother's landlord threatens to up my mother's rent if I don't leave. I return home. Was greeted with a horrible stench and was forced to clean my whole house top to bottom to get rid of it. Daughter starts to scream in her sleep. This occurs about once a week. I can't wake her, but she's screaming. Doctors find nothing wrong. April 1st, husband returns home. Everything stops happening. I feel like I'm crazy because no one has witnessed this but me. He gets a job at home. Everything seems fine. We live happily. August 6th. While outside on the balcony, the door handle that I had just used with no problem breaks, trapping me outside. While trying to climb down from the second floor, I fall, break my back and end up hospitalized. My aunt moves in to help with my daughter while I recover. Months later, my aunt confesses that from day one of being there, she felt like someone was watching her and was often cold. I was drugged up for 2 months while recovering, so I don't have much to say. October 27th, we decided to move my daughter into her own bedroom before her birthday. We had the baby monitor, a blanket and a bag sitting on the coffee table when we all stepped outside, husband, aunt, daughter and I, to see our friend in the parking lot. When we returned, the baby monitor was sitting on the floor, 3 feet away, in an upright position. This is when my husband believed me about what I said while he was gone, and my aunt confessed to her issues. October 29th. A doll that had been sitting on a shelf in my daughter's room is sitting upright in the middle of the living room the next morning. My daughter couldn't reach it nor leave her crib. My aunt was sleeping on the couch and heard no one in the night. November 2018 to July 2019. I'm grouping this together because there's too much stuff in the journal. Basically, the house went haywire. I have several days where multiple entries occur. Thumping, lights flickering, bad odours, cold spots, toys turning on by themselves, objects moving, whispering, and my daughter develops nightmares on an almost nightly basis. March 9th. Our friend W comes to visit. In a very disturbing way to greet her, the word hello is written on the bathroom mirror from a marker that originated from a separate room. This isn't her first dealing with hauntings, so she replies with, "Hello, who are you?" Later, it replied with, "Rick." June 14th. Our friend L asks to use our apartment to host a party for an MLM since she was a part of. 30 plus people show up throughout the night. One, who has never stepped foot in our apartment prior, commented that the bathroom light kept turning on and off the whole night, even when no one was in there. June 29th. My mother and her boyfriend come to visit. Everyone was drinking and goofing off. Suddenly, the boyfriend demands to go home and leaves without explaining. Later, my mother informs me that he saw a black mass floating around the ceiling, hover around me, and move like it was pulling something out of me. He convinces my mom to have a cleansing done. July 1st, evening. My mother, with the aid of her boyfriend and guidance from his friend, performed a cleansing. Drawing everything out of the main door, my daughter screamed the whole time this was happening, but immediately fell asleep once it was done. The house felt still, like frozen in time until sunrise. July 2nd, morning. A black handprint was found on the roof of the outside stairs. Context, I lived in a multi-family home. The stairs to the second floor were outside because the second floor is a separate apartment. From then on, we didn't have anything else happen. We moved out in June of 2020. 2 months later, my daughter asked me why we no longer lived in an old house. I told her why, and that we're not moving back there. She replied with, "Good. Mr. Black was scary. He wanted to eat my face." This took place a lifetime ago, as I was still a kid living with my parents. I recall the event to best of my memory, but the order of such events might be different, so bear with me. The experiences took place during the span of a year or so, and were very traumatic for me, while not being excessively scary for the most. Remember, I was around 12 or 13 years old. We used to live in a big semi-detached house spanning 4 floors for a total of 400 meters squared plus garden. I'll skip the basement sounds, as I think those were suggestions of my mind and not worth reporting. Besides, there were unexplained sounds from the basement, which was converted to a playroom, and where I didn't feel the need to spend much time in. Anyway, the ground floor was a living room with a big pendulum clock. It was missing the internal weight to prevent it from ever going off. Decorative, let's say. Kitchen, a service toilet, and a small bedroom for an au pair living with us and taking care of the house. The second floor was the night area, where we had my parents' room, my brother's room, my room, and a guest room, which was closed most of the time as unused. The third floor was an attic, where we had a table tennis table, a computer, and 2 small rooms for all the stuff we didn't want to trash. I used to spend my afternoons with friends playing Super Nintendo and stuff. One afternoon, I was still playing on my own as I was in the house with the cleaning lady only. She was in the garden doing some stuff, when I clearly heard the clock going off. It was a busy day, so I didn't pay much attention to it as it was not scary at all. I did mention it during the dinner, and I was jokingly deemed as delusional as my father opened it, clearly showing that the mechanism was blocked, and sounds from it were impossible. I took it like any 13-year-old, and I left the table pissed off, heading to my room. A couple of days passed by, and one evening I was playing in my room as always, while my parents and brother were on the ground floor watching TV. I was on my way to the toilet when I heard a very loud laugh coming from the upper attic level. That scared the living shit out of me, as it was so real that I started calling my father in panic, saying a man had a very loud laugh in the attic. He rushed up and went up for inspection while I was holding my breath. Again, it was a no-show. Nothing there, and I started double guessing if there was something wrong with me. Following these 2 events, I became not paranoid but reasonably scared. Hence I stopped sleeping with my door open, like that would save me from a horde of ghosts. A few nights later, it must have been 3 or 4 a.m. I woke up for no reason. I've always been a light sleeper, and I saw the window curtain moving, like there would be a significant wind blowing on it. I stood up to close the window just to realise it was perfectly closed and there were no wind nor leaks. This was spooky enough to switch the lights on and wait for the sunrise to show up. In the following months, I tried to ignore minor events like curtains moving while walking to my door, like to inform them that they saw me coming. Lights and open doors which I was sure would be closed. Eventually, we moved out due to some financial complications. Not to mention that I was the only happy person in my family when that happened. To this day, I'm 40 now. I remember that house with terror. I was never hurt in a material way, so at least I acknowledge that. This happened in 2012. I want to give all the context, so I apologise it's long. It was the summer after my freshman year of college, and I was at my parents' house. It's a ranch-style house on a hill where you enter onto the second floor through the front door, and there's a staircase that goes downstairs where you can exit to the woods outside the back of the house. My parents were away for work. They worked together, and I was planning to pull an all-nighter to meet a writing deadline for my internship. It was Saturday, and my younger brother, 17 at the time, was planning to go to some big party with a handful of his friends, including one of our childhood friends from the Netherlands who was staying with us for the summer. My best friend and I agreed to drop him and his friends off and pick them up. I'll skip ahead to the part when we picked them up from the party. There were 5 of them from total, the 4 we dropped off plus another one tagging along who I didn't know, and they were so drunk. I never heard the new kids say a word. We brought them back and they crashed in various parts of the house pretty much immediately. My best friend and I took the California King in the master bedroom downstairs, where I would pull my all-nighter writing once she fell asleep. And one of the friends crashed in the sitting room behind our bedroom. You had to go through our bedroom to get to it. Everyone else was upstairs. My brother was in his room directly above the sitting room. His other friend was in the guest room directly above the master. And our Netherlands friend plus the new kid actually fell asleep sitting up, leaning on each other, on the couch in the living room upstairs, across an open floor plan from the front door/dining room area. So it's 3 a.m. and everyone except me is asleep. I had just come back downstairs after putting on a pot of coffee and had seen the two boys on the couch in the same position they'd been in all night. I got into the bathroom at the foot of the stairs and don't bother locking the door. Just as I sit down to pee, I suddenly hear voices having a conversation upstairs, right near the top of the steps, which is also close to the front door, and it's clearly a man and a woman. So I assume something went wrong on the trip and my parents have come home unexpectedly. They weren't due back for another couple of days. Fearing they would immediately come downstairs to their room, I run over and lock the bathroom door, then finish peeing, washing my hands, etc. And all the while I can hear this animated conversation upstairs, but can't make out what they're saying, even though it's getting louder and louder. I finish up quickly in the bathroom because I need to go greet my parents and explain why we're in their bed and all these kids, who are surely awake and confused now, at least the ones in the living room, are in the house. So I'm running up the stairs and the conversation is getting noticeably louder and louder the closer I get. As I'm a couple steps away from the top landing, they're fully yelling, and the moment my foot hits the top of the steps, silence. I look at the front door and scan the whole dining room and living room area for my parents. No one is there. Everything is exactly the same as it was a few minutes ago when I was upstairs, including the two boys sitting exactly as they were before, fast asleep. I start shaking and my heart starts pounding, keeping my back to the stairs. I go back into the kitchen all the way up to the coffee pot, too scared to turn my back on the area the voices were coming from. With shaking hands, I pour another cup of coffee and stand there in shock, desperately trying to rationalize what just happened. At this moment, the friend who was in the guest room comes into the kitchen, barely awake, still drunk, looking for water. I asked, "Did you hear any of that?" And he had no idea what I was talking about. I gave him water and he went back to bed. I told myself the new kid I never heard speak must have a voice like a woman, and him and our friend must have woken up, had the conversation, and somehow fallen asleep right when I got upstairs. It didn't make any sense, but I was so terrified, I forced myself to accept it at least until daylight. I went back downstairs, eventually got back to work, and once I finished, I waited until the sun came up to try to get some sleep. A few hours later, everyone was up, and I eagerly said good morning to the new kid to hear his voice. It turned out to be far deeper than anyone else's in the house, and a sharp chill ran down my spine. I asked him and our friend if they woke up and had a heated conversation in the middle of the night, but I already knew the answer. No. In fact, as soon as one woke up and realised they were sleeping on each other, he moved to a different chair. As everyone gathered in the living room, I told them all what happened, and no one knew what to say or had any idea how to explain it. This experience forced me to allow for the existence of the paranormal, ghosts, whatever, because it's been almost 10 years and I still have no explanation. The property borders a wooded wildlife preserve that was originally the home of the Minka tribe, along with the whole neighbourhood and more land beyond that. I'm not sure where this tribe lives today, and don't believe this is even the name they call themselves. I don't know why this thought kept entering my head as I tried to figure out what happened. Maybe because I couldn't make out the conversation? The house itself was only 60 years old or so, and to my knowledge, no one died there, though the woman who lived there before us swore it was haunted.